Good evening, good evening. At this time, we call this High Springs City Commissioner meeting to order, August the 11th at 6:30. At this time, we'll have the invocation by Pastor Andrew Miller, and then following that, we have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Have roll call too.
Oh, I'm sorry. You-
Okay. Mayor Williams,
Here.
Vice Mayor James.
Here.
Commissioner Ambrose.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Whites.
Here.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Pastor Miller.
And kindness that you have towards us on a daily basis. Father, we ask, God, that you continue to lead us in all truth. God, our every footstep in your word. God, continue, God, to cover this community. Continue, God, to wrap your arms around those that have lost loved ones. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Miller. At this time, I entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
I will make a motion that the agenda for August the 11th, 2022 be approved as printed.
That's the amended agenda, right?
Yes.
Amended agenda.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, at this time, I entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, item number E, special presentation of the water and wastewater development change study. Hello.
Hello.
Catherine Van Zandt, and you you had a impact fee study done by Florida Rural Water Association, and I represented Florida Rural Water Association in preparing it. We gave you a copy, but wanted to impact fee studies for utilities can sometimes be confusing. Sometimes you get a lot of questions. And so I wanted to just go through it a little bit and explain the concepts real thoroughly. And your city manager encouraged that also, so that as you get questions, you'll be able to have already gotten as thorough understanding as possible on what this is about. And I also want to give you an opportunity to ask me any questions in the process also. Now, it's called an impact fee study, but actually a better term to use for it is capacity fee study with utilities. And we'll get into this as we go on, but it's about the capacity that you have built into your system for providing water service and wastewater service, and then provide that to new users as they come on board. It's a member service that Florida Rural Water Association offers to its members, and Florida Rural Water Association specializes in water, wastewater rates, financing. There they serve over 1,400 cities and towns, but actually I believe it's over 2,800 now, and have done a lot more than 1,000 financing and rate studies, and one of them has been yours. They have never had a legal challenge. They use rational procedures that are in line with AWWA, the industry standards, and the Florida statutes. And Florida statutes have change on this and get revised on this, and Florida Rural Water Association keeps up with the revisions on the statutes also. So you have 4 areas of revenues. The rates, which are everybody in this room knows about because you get them, monthly services. Capacity fees, which are one-time charges for coming into the system, and that's what we'll talk more about tonight. Connection charges when you get a new meter, where you have stub outs for your wastewater. Usually it involves your grinder pumps in those areas. And then you have the other fees, late charges, turn-offs, sometimes fees for credit card charges. So a capacity fee is charged one time to a new user, and it reimburses for capital and fixed costs that are capacity within the system. The charges for having your wells, your water treatment plants, your distribution systems, your pumps. As a city, you have had to build in extra capacity in your system. You might need 100,000 gallons per day for the users that you have in the city right now. But you have a new neighborhood that wants to come on board and says, okay, we're going to need another 25,000 gallons per day, and we're going to be in a year. You can't provide it within a year. Utilities don't work that way. You can't have the pumps, you can't have an automatic expansion on your plants, you can't have the lines in place and the lines further up the line big enough for it. So with utilities, you have to know ahead of time, you have to project ahead of time how much you're going to need in capacity so that when the new people come on, you've already got it available for them, which means you're spending the money ahead of time to have these pieces of capacity available for the new users that are going to come on board. So that's about the growth. And it's always a question. It's a question that you all are having to talk through right now quite a bit in the other areas here around on this side of Gainesville. And basically, the choice ends up being somebody's going to pay for this new growth coming on board. Your existing users have been paying for it, have been paying for the capacity to be built in. Who's going to carry it? Are the new users coming on board fairly going to pay for the capacity that they're going to come in and use? Or do the existing users pay for the new users to be able to come on board? And it's a question that I honestly had to really work through as I started working with Florida Rural Water Association, because I had met with a lot of realtor groups, developer groups, and had always heard, well, it's going to increase the cost of housing. It's going to be harder to have affordable housing if we have these capacity fees on board. And that sounded good. So I dug in with Florida Rural, dug in to understand what is fair for the people that are already using the water utilities and for the new people coming on board. The capacity fees make it possible for the new users to pay a proportion of the services of the system that you've already had to have available, that you've had to also maintain, rehabilitate, repair, and keep available in working condition. An example is thinking of seats on the bus. You can think of the seats on the bus as capacity. You've had people already using the bus, paying for their seat, but you've had to keep the seats available as new people come on with their seats. So the rates, the gas, the tires, the drivers, the repair, your existing ratepayers have been paying for this. They've paid for their seat. And now the new passengers come on, pay for their own seat on the bus, pay for what they're using within your system. So this is what comes home as you've been talking through budget, how the city is going to manage. Capacity fees. The objective is the new growth, the new development pays its own way, pays for what it's going to use. That provides to be able to fund the major expansions that are being created by the growth that's happening. That helps to minimize debt so that you're not going into debt as much in order to provide these new services, new infrastructure. And it also provides for you to be able to have the retained earnings so you're not using up your cash reserves as much in order to meet your new capital needs. But we all know what the economy is like right now. When I walk up to the meat section in the grocery store, I feel like crying. And so it's an inevitable question, do we really need one more fee? Florida statute requires that you prepare for growth. You can't get your permits renewed for your water treatment plant or your wastewater treatment plant without saying, this is how much we are going to be needing over the next 20 years, and we are prepared for that. This is how close we are to the capacity of the plant. And it, like I said, it takes capacity into your system. Plus, you have to keep it in operating condition. And you're always having to do your repair and replacement. And your infrastructure is always aging. If you have an area like you do where a lot of the infrastructure was put in the 70s, in the 80s, at this point, it's 50 years old. You have transite pipe in the ground, very fragile pipe that was put in when transite pipe was okay to use. It wouldn't be used anymore. And as it gets this old, anybody working around it knows that you have a problem. It breaks down easily. So you have had to keep on repairing and replacing to keep the capacity that's needed for what you have now and the capacity that's going to be needed as the new users come on board. One way you can do it is just look at what other people are charging and take an average of that. You didn't do that. Instead, you let Florida Rural Water provide a service to you. To do that, it's not defensible, it's not rational, and it's not appropriate. High Springs is a prime example of where it's not appropriate, because think of another community where you have a town, they're just serving the town area. So they have a certain amount of pipes, pump stations, plant, but it's all contained within an area. They have a certain amount of infrastructure and a certain amount of people taking it. That's a cost divided up by those people. But in High Springs, you have your infrastructure very spread out. It's a more rural community. You have developments coming on way over on the east end of town, on the west end of town. You have the older area here in the middle. And so you have a lot more infrastructure for the same amount of people. That means that you have a higher cost per capita than many other communities have. So basically, what it boils down to is you total up all of the value of your system. So that's your plants, for water, it'd be your water plant, your storage tank, your pipes, and that total value of your system divided by equivalent residential connections. So that would be one per house, or for commercial areas, proportional to how much they use. And then for a new use, so you have a certain cost per ERC, equivalent residential connection. And then when new users want to come on board, how many ERCs are they wanting? Maybe it's just one house being built. Maybe it's a neighborhood with as much as 1,400 houses. So you multiply the cost per ERC times the ERCs, and that's the impact, that's the capacity fee that they're going to pay. Now, in the study we gave you, there's two options: remaining useful life and replacement value. I don't want to get too much in the weeds with you on it, but remaining useful life is just based on the current condition, based on the years that it's expected to continue. And replacement value is the true value of what you have to have there. And a good example would be you have a lift station, and it's 30 years old. So it's Remaining useful life is pretty much zero. Its replacement value is how much it's worth, how much it costs to have that lift station. Now, over these years, you've repaired it, you've placed it, you've kept it going, and pretty soon you're going to have to replace it. If you look at how much impact fee with the remaining useful life, there's no impact fee being paid for that because it's zero. But the fact is, that is an area of capacity that you're having to keep available, and it is being used for you. It's getting ready to be repaired or replaced. The replacement value is a fairer value for Florida Rural contends that it's a fairer value for the city to have to use for their impact fees. It's a decision that you as a commission decide. So for your water capacity fees, you've been charging $250. The recommendation for the report is $8,150 per ERC for the replacement value basis. That equates to, for your system and your capital cost, about $8.17 per gallon. You have about, at this point, 470 more service connections available before you make 100% capacity at your plant. That in this recommended capacity fees, that's worth about $3 million to you. For the wastewater, currently you're charging $2,120 for a connection fee. With the replacement value, it would be $6,350. That's $33.94 per gallon. Your wastewater plant's a whole story of its own, as you know, but just with the numbers here that you're getting ready to expand it, you're using right now 66% of it based on your flows. So at 85% capacity, that leaves you with 757 ERCs. And at that capacity fee, it's worth about $4.8 million of impact fees. So that gives you an idea of what the impact fees mean for you. I'm glad to entertain any questions that you have for it. And it also gives you an idea of what you've been charging compared to what is a fair and legal value for you to charge for them.
Ma'am, any questions?
You always look at me, Mr. Mayor. Can you go back to your last slide, please?
Sure.
I just want to clarify, in terms of wastewater capacity, you say that 66% of our plant is being used. I thought it was more than that.
Well, that's based on your, you just raised the permitted capacity.
Right.
And so based on your permitted capacity, I think it's about 3 MGD, and you're using average day flow. So, and based on the last 24 months, 66% of that. Now, if you look at the projections for what you're going to see with your wastewater treatment plant, you also know that you're projected to reach that capacity that you just raised to, I think it's within the next 6 years, very soon. So in your consideration that I thought it was more than that, that's where it's at right now. But looking at the projections, at the growth that you've been having, and then if you add in the potential growth of developers that have talked about coming in or that you're working with, it's even more than that. So that third that you have right now is quickly disappearing, and that's probably why you have that impression. And just like I said about the time it takes to put infrastructure in place with utilities, 5 years is just a very, very short time to make the kind of infrastructure changes that you need to make.
And just to add clarification, because of the numbers that have been thrown out to y'all previously, we add up the number of lots left in the community when we determine the capacity. So when you think of the higher number, this is based off of, if, correct me if I'm wrong, what's going on now, but with the number of lots, if all the number of lots were taken, then that number would be higher. It's just we don't have all those lots developed that are available in this city.
Yeah, and something that plays in with that also is you have a very low per capita wastewater flow compared to other areas. And so if you use number of lots and you use the comprehensive plan values for how much flow should be for that lot, or just standard values, it would also be a much higher number and an even quicker diminishing of your capacity that you have.
I have another question. In terms of the water capacity, the numbers that you have there is based on the existing 2 wells. Is that correct?
Well, your third well does not add capacity. Your
The cup isn't changing much. They brought us down.
Your third, well, you mean with the consumptive use
Yeah,
permit?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Definitely. But your third well is actually a backup well. So as far your consumptive use permit is a separate subject. When your third well was permitted with the Water Management District, because I actually worked on that permit, we did not ask for any more consumptive use for you for that third well. It's just to provide the backup, especially because you had the problems with the 2 wells and you couldn't afford to have a problem with 1 well and then another one and not have. Say, capacity for the 3 wells is basically the same.
So the capacity that you reference in the water slide takes into account our current consumptive use permit? Or is it just completely
Takes into
independent of
account
that
your
entirely?
treatment plant capacity.
Okay.
Does not take into account your current consumptive use
Okay.
permit.
And is there, one more question, is there, in terms of moving forward with impact fees or capacity fees, in the event where we're running new wastewater pipe through an existing neighborhood that was there before the new impact fees were agreed to, is there a way to grandfather those existing residents in to the previous hookup fee?
The capacity fees would only be for new,
Okay.
that wouldn't apply to them. Of is capacity fees cannot be based on money that based on grant money. So if you have some infrastructure that's being like you have with your upcoming wastewater treatment plant, honest, that as far as the whole picture of your wastewater infrastructure is just a part of it, because you have a lot of value of all the pipes you have in the ground, because you have a lot of pipes, like I said, being so spread out. And if you look at all the probably pretty boring back pages of that impact fee study, you can see the different costs for the different parts. But when you have infrastructure that's been paid for by grants, sometimes you'll have some that's been paid for by a developer because there's an agreement, okay, you go in, but you put in this transmission line. That part of your infrastructure cannot be counted for what's considered for your not cost that the city has incurred. That's a legal requirement. And as you have a lot of growth here, you should revisit your impact fees because they'll change, and it can with cost it can be to your advantage.
When you say new user, do you mean a new home, or do you mean someone moving in, buying a home that's already here? Does that explain?
I mean, a home that has not had utility service before.
Okay, good. That's what I'm.
Right.
Any more questions? All right, anyone from the audience have a question?
What fees are you recommending?
These are the fees that, so for a new user coming on board for water, $8,150 per connection. So if it was a house, it would be $8,150. If it's a commercial facilities, depends on how much water they're going to use. If it's a laundromat, they'll use a lot more water than a little diner.
So for a new house, $3,630?
Or, depending on which basis the commission decides to use, it's either $3,630 or $8,150. And then, so there's one fee for water and another fee for wastewater. Let's see if I can do this right. Okay. And then there's a separate fee for wastewater, which is either $3,440 or $6,350.
I built a new house, $10,000.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, moving on.
Will this be coming back to us to take formal action on, or is staff looking for what we're leaning towards as an A or B option tonight?
Well, we will be bringing an ordinance in the future after we meet any notification requirements and all that sort of good things. But, yeah, if you could give us direction, would be helpful for when we start drafting the ordinances.
Okay, Mayor?
Yes.
Towards that end, I'm leaning towards option B. There are no simple solutions to a lot of the issues facing our community. Citizens are constantly talking about, growth and that type of thing. Well, if you increase the cost of coming to the community, that may help slow growth. But it also means it's very clear that who's going to pay for that growth is the people coming into the community. And I think this study that's been professionally done using the methodology and an impartial, group really does show that we've been using more money to take care of our infrastructure than we were charging. $250 to connect a water meter, and here we have a study that says, you could be $3,600 to $8,000 depending on how you wanted to look at it. So that may be one of the reasons why a lot of the things we haven't been able to do is we haven't been collecting enough money and representing the true cost. So I'm inclined to go with option B as an ordinance is drafted, and I believe it will help empower the city to meet some of the challenges through the revenue that's raised by people coming into the community.
I agree. We don't have the money because we've not been charging it for new construction, and this is the only way we're going to get it. Otherwise, it's the current residents who are going to be paying for this.
Mr. Mayor, in following on that comment exactly, we currently have, Bruce gave me numbers, 1,057 water hookups, 1,796 water and wastewater hookups, for a total of 2,853 utility customers. And I guess I just want to clarify again, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but these impact fees would be for new construction only, not new hookups through existing neighborhoods, right? Okay. Thank you. I am in agreement. We need the revenue so we can take care of business.
And I know we realized for quite a while that we have been charging a fee that was less than what we needed to sustain ourselves. So I think at this point, we don't have any choice except to bring ourselves up to date a little bit and not have to pay funds that we really don't have our hands on. So I don't know if we have a different choice. B is also my recommendation.
All right, thank you. I agree. I think if you move into the city, you should pay for your moving. I don't think the citizens of High Springs should pay even part of that revenue, that fee. So I'm in agreement also. So that pretty much.
I like direction.
All right. Anything else before we move on? Okay. Where are we? Okay, moving on to unfinished business. Discuss and consider ordinance 2022-13. City manager, Mr. Attorney?
Mr. Mayor, we have before you a mural ordinance. There's been a lot of questions about it and quite a lot of drafting as well. I think the existing mural ordinance that has been sent to you from our office is in a form that it passes constitutional muster with a few tweaks to it. There's been emails from Commissioner Whites, and there's been emails from Commissioner Ambrose over this last week, and questions about it. But I think we're in a place where we can at least move it forward with your input at this stage and using what we have at present. And as I said, making a few tweaks perhaps in accordance with what your direction is, then I think it can move forward to Planning and Zoning Board, come back before you, and then be subject to enactment. The first thing that I would speak to is that whenever you're implementing an ordinance, when you're drafting an ordinance that relates to murals, it relates to artwork. And the United States constitutional law and Florida law says that if you're dealing with artwork, that is an expression of speech. So now we throw in all the constitutional law on freedom of speech into this area. So from a legal standpoint, we have to be very, very cognizant and very careful about drafting such an ordinance, number one. And then number two, we have to be very careful and cognizant about how we approach the ordinance whenever we implement the ordinance. If it is passed by the city at some stage, then we have to be very careful about how we implement the ordinance. And starting with the idea of the First Amendment, which governs free speech, the government shall not enact any law which infringes upon our ability to have free speech, establishment of religion. That's in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So that's there, and then of course we have cases at the U.S. Supreme Court level and on the state level that interpret that amendment, and what does that mean? And one of my favorite quotes is from a John Stuart Mills, and he talked in 1859, right before the Civil War, about what does this mean? And what he said was, he started the idea of the free marketplace of ideas, is what he coined. And that got picked up in 1919 by Oliver Wendell Holmes in a case before Justice Holmes, in the case before the United States Supreme Court. And he also coined the phrase and used John Stuart Mill's phrase about the free marketplace of ideas. And basically what that phrase is that if somebody comes up with let's say Ashley, for example, comes up with a good idea and announces that in a public forum, and I come up with another idea, and let's say it's a lousy idea. The free marketplace of ideas is that the fact we're going to talk about this idea as being a lousy idea, this idea about being a very good idea, and the free marketplace justifies which idea moves forward. And that's been used many, many, many times. When the neo-Nazi party marched in Skokie, Illinois, the reason they sought Skokie, Illinois, because that was the highest per capita concentration of Jewish survivors of the concentration camp that happened in World War II. So it's a horrible idea, one would think, to have the neo-Nazi party march through Skokie, Illinois, and the city denied the permit. But the United States Supreme Court said the free marketplace of idea governs. If you squelch the idea, if you pass laws that infringe upon freedom of speech, even though the speech might be a lousy idea, that's violative of the United States Constitution and violative of free speech. There was a case that just happened a couple of years ago, and it's Reed versus Town of Gilbert, United States Supreme Court case. And Justice Thomas, Clarence Thomas, wrote the majority opinion for the U.S. Supreme Court. And in that case, Pastor Reed was putting out in the town of Gilbert signs, and they're directional signs. And they said that we're going to have, I think it was a Presbyterian church that Pastor Reed was the pastor for. And the sign said that we're having worship service, and it was a small church in the town of Gilbert, didn't have its own church building, so they were using a local facility. I think it was a library that they were actually meeting in. And so they had a sign that said, hey, we're having a Sunday service, 11 o'clock this Sunday. And they put the signs up. You've seen them, the little yard signs that they would put up. And the town of Gilbert passed a law which said you have to take those signs, they can only be up for a number of hours, 6 hours. You gotta take them down right away. And it basically said directional signs are going to be subject to this ordinance. And Justice Thomas said, you can't do that. You're regulating speech by passing a law like that against Pastor Reed and citing him with a violation by the code enforcement officer. And it seems on its face that sign that Pastor Reed is putting out, that we've got a congregation service 11 o'clock this Sunday, it seems very innocuous the way the law was written, because it didn't speak to religious signs or didn't really speak to the content of the signs, but it infringed on the pastor's ability to put the sign out earlier, leave it up later, and that sort of thing. So the Supreme Court Justice Thomas said that's just wrong, and it's unconstitutional to do that. So that was a big case that was passed, and what I'm talking about with freedom of speech relates to signs, because of the town of Gilbert case. It relates to murals. And so whenever you're drafting an ordinance such as this, there's a number of standards that you have to look to before you enact such an ordinance. And those are that the mural ordinance cannot have content-based restrictions. So when you look at it, and again, using the example, if I would put up a mural in maybe I have a big living room wall, and I like that mural a lot. Ashley says, I don't like that mural. I would never have that mural. I don't like the content of it. I don't want to hang it in my living room of my house. But Scott, you can hang it on your house if you want to, but it can't go. Government cannot do that. Government can't base a restriction in a mural ordinance based upon like this one, don't like that one. It can't be content-based. It has to be content-based neutral. That's the hallmark of a mural ordinance or an art ordinance. That's point number one. And now the second as-applied nature of an ordinance is you can't have a methodology that is so Byzantine or so difficult to go through that is another way of restricting the permitting process. And so if it's, let me go back for just a second. Content-based restrictions must be neutrally applied, but it's not unbridled discretion that you have. In other words, if something is pornographic, if it's vulgar, or if it is defamatory or something of that nature, then you can restrict it. That is something that is allowed to happen. There's a famous quote, I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. That was one of one of the phrases that was provided by, I can't remember the justice right now, but Justice Stevens maybe, I think. But so it's hard to describe what that may be, but there is a governmental interest based upon the current community standards in High Springs as to what can be placed on a wall. But we have very limited jurisdiction over that kind of art unless it meets such community standards that it is vulgar, defamatory, pornographic, that sort of thing. Then you have the ability to regulate it. But pretty much anything else besides that, as a content-based restriction, you will have trouble if it's in your law restricting such an artwork, or if it is applied in that manner, you will have trouble as well in the court system. So that's point number one. Now, you do have the ability to have certain size, as long as it's a rationally based governmental interest, you have the ability to have some size restrictions, which we have in this ordinance. If it's 15 foot high, it can occupy 100% of the wall. If it's a wall that's 30 foot high, it can occupy, I think it's 50% of the wall. I believe is the way the ordinance is written. We can look at it in a moment. But so you have some ability to have size descriptions, but you cannot put in requirements that restrict the ordinance in such a way, or the mural in such a way, that it becomes an as-applied unconstitutional restriction or a prior restraint. Sometimes it's an unconstitutional prior restraint, is the way it's termed in the law, such as all lettering is hereby not allowed, or things of that nature. You can't have that kind of restriction, because then it becomes so restrictive that it becomes content-based, essentially. It's another way of creating a restriction that it will fail constitutional muster on that basis. In this ordinance, we have a 10% restriction. So we say that lettering can be 10% of the mural itself. So not all of the mural, and that's common to mural ordinances that we found in the state of Florida. So that seems to be the area that other municipalities have passed with respect to mural ordinances. So that is the ground rules that you have. Now, in the procedural process of a mural ordinance, you cannot have a mural ordinance such that there is unbridled governmental restrictions or ability to either grant or deny the permit. That is going to be unconstitutional prior restraint. So we've tried to achieve a based ordinance that doesn't do those things. And in our ordinance, we say in 60 days, you have to grant or deny the mural. When somebody files an application and that mural is, the application for the mural painting is complete, then the process should resolve itself within 60 days. And of course, you can schedule your planning and zoning board if it's going to the P&Z and get that on schedule, and then follow it up at the next city commission meeting and have that done. One of the suggestions was that we have only one permit at a time and that it be a very lengthy process. I think that that would fail as a prior restraint, because there's not a legitimate governmental purpose for extenuating this process in such a manner that it would be very, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to defend a procedure that is of that nature. So my recommendation would be not to have that kind of procedure. And let me give you an example of that. Right now, the Florida legislature just passed a law, I think it was this past legislative session, that if I apply for a building permit your building permit department must rule upon that law within 20 days. If your building permit official fails to do so, it's deemed granted. And there's another provision that if you want to use a private building permit official, you can do that to move your building permits along. So there's a legislative intent to move permits along at a fairly quick rate. So again, if the legislative intent is a building permit, which is pretty complex matter, you have plumbing, electrical, structural, roofing, all of those things, and you got to rule on that in 20 days, and you have a very difficult process for an applicant to get through to get one mural permit permitted at a time, and then have another, and that process is very lengthy. I think it would be probably struck down as a unconstitutional infringement. So we've said, all right, you have to do this within 60 days total, but 30 days it needs to be in process and in hearing before planning and zoning and the city commission. And that's the process for mural permits that are outside of the historic district. Historic district is a little different. We have a protection in the historic district section of the mural permitting, which says can't destroy the bricks of the old buildings. You got to be careful about how you put the mural onto, but it has to be, if you're going to do that, it has to be something that can be removed without destroying the integrity of the historic building. And of course, our Historic Preservation Board sits as, our Planning and Zoning Board sits as Historic Preservation. So the original draft of the ordinance said it goes to Historic Preservation. Then after that's done, your mural permit is complete, and I tweak that. I think that that's problematic. I think when you submit the mural permit, it is complete, whether the process goes to historic or goes to P&Z. It's complete when you submit your application. So I've tweaked the language to take away that the mural permit is not complete in a historic district. So it goes to historic district. Historic district rules yay or nay on the application that is before you. I would submit to you have a little bit more leeway, a little bit more legislative discretion, I believe, in a historic district as opposed to murals that are in the non-historic district areas. But then the original draft of the ordinance said it goes back to Planning and Zoning Board, which is the same board that just ruled on the Historic Preservation Board. So I've deleted that from the ordinance, and that's one of the tweaks that I would suggest that we make and go to P&Z. One of the problems could be, I suppose, if you have the Historic Preservation Board, which is your P&Z board, permit the same application, then it goes back again before that board sitting as P&Z, and they deny it. Well, what's the legitimate basis as to why you're permitted at one and then denying it on another? So that doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, is that a prior restraint, and is it unconstitutional by doing that? Then it goes, ultimately, whether it's in the historic district or in a regular district, it's got to go before this body, and you have to decide on the granting, denial, or questioning, moving it to a date certain in the future, the permitting process of the permit application. And so that's the procedure that I'm recommending we go through with respect to this ordinance. I think the way it is drafted now, I believe it would pass constitutional muster. My advice, if this passes and if a mural permit is before you, my advice is going to be the same as it is right now. If you simply don't like it and you're denying the permit on that basis because the artwork just you don't like, that it's not going to work. As applied, You cannot say the content of this, this matter, this permit that's before you, the content doesn't pass my like or my ability. That's an unconstitutional provision. So as it's applied, my advice is going to be the same to you, that you're just not allowed to do that. There was a case, and I think it was up in Pennsylvania, where somebody put a mural on their side of their building that criticized the town council for some action that they had done. And the council went after them with code enforcement and said, you can't put that in. It was thinly disguised that really they were upset because that mural was critical of what the town council had done. And you can't, the United States Supreme Court said you can't do that. If somebody wants to criticize something that has happened, they have the ability to get on their soapbox and do that. That's part of what constitutional law is all about. So that's the general nature of what it is that we're doing. This is one of those things that's been very hard. This is not an easy one for lawyers, because it takes me all the way back to constitutional law. You have to look at all the ordinances in the state of Florida that have mural ordinance regulations, and then try to take that to the current date with cases like Town of Gilbert and the Reed case, and look at it from not only a standpoint of drafting the ordinance, but then also the application of the ordinance. My opinion is, at this stage, with those tweaks, we have an ordinance that makes sense from a operational standpoint, and it makes sense from a constitutional standpoint. One other area that I think is problematic is the way we had the original draft of the ordinance, is if it is in the line of sight, essentially, for a residence, or if it's facing a residence, the mural, then it's not allowed. And I thought about that provision, and using an example, if my house is 6 blocks away and I can still see the residence, is that facing the mural? And if I can see the very top of that mural from my house, can I restrict the placement of that mural? And is that a prior restraint, and is it unconstitutional? And I would say, as applied, it is. I think what the intent of that is that if a house is next door and you wake up every day and have to see a mural, and maybe you like it, maybe you don't like that mural, that's where we're trying to say, okay, that seems problematic against a residence. So now, if right across the way is, if there's a street that intervenes, is that facing? It's too, that provision, I think, in the original language was too loosey-goosey and subject to constitutional challenge. I've amended that language, or would suggest tweaking that language. And I looked at a mural ordinance from Lake Park, Florida, which is down in Broward County. Their provision said the minimum setback requirement is that murals shall not be placed on buildings that are 50 feet of a residential structure, measured from the closest exterior edge of the view of the surface of the mural to the closest parallel residential wall. And the way I read that is that if the residence is this sheet of paper, if the mural is where my hand is, and the intervening space, however you measure it, directly across, or if it's diagonally, or however it's measured, is 50 feet, then you can't put the mural in that place. It can't be right here. It can't be, as long as it's 50 feet. If it's beyond 50 feet, you can. So there's a measurable standard, as opposed to something that is 6 blocks away, 8 blocks away. And how do you measure it? What do you do? So that's another tweak that I made to the mural ordinance, so that I believe it'll pass constitutional muster. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that's the background. That's where we're at. I'm happy to field any questions that any of you have. Next step is if you believe it is acceptable with those tweaks, then the next step is to send it to Planning and Zoning Board.
This is the one that we just got this afternoon?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what it, okay.
Now, there are several tweaks that I would make to that ordinance. One is that, as I said, on the 50 feet portion of the minimum setback requirement, I would amend that provision. And I'll find it for you as to where that is.
Oh, that's what I was looking for.
It's in section, page 4 of 8, section 7.12.04, and then subparagraph 2, D, as in dog, minimum setback
Minimum
requirement,
setback
mules
requirement.
shall not be placed on a building facade that is directly abutting a residential structure. My view is, looking at that, that's a little too loosey-goosey. So it would be the 50-foot language.
Okay.
And then the other tweak that I made was as to murals in a historic district, which is on the next page, page 5. And instead of it going from Historic Preservation Board back to the same board sitting as the Planning and Zoning Board, it would just go straight up to the City Commission for final approval.
Planning board to city board.
There's one other section that I amended,
Commission.
or would suggest amending, and that is as to the section as to mural maintenance. I believe that that provides sufficient safeguards and this is section 712.11, so paragraph 1. This is found on page 6. And this was borrowed from one of the other mural ordinances and I think it's an unnecessary restraint on a private property owner. And this is that paragraph 1 on the bottom of page 6. Murals installed in accordance with this section shall remain on site in the approved location and cannot be altered, replaced, or removed except as provided in the section or when deemed unsafe by the city building official in terms as necessary to due to damage from natural disasters. The seller, here's the language that I think is problematic. The seller of the property containing the mural installed in compliance with the article shall include restrictions by deed or other instrument that requires the buyer to agree to retain and maintain the mural in compliance with this article. I think that's an unnecessary restriction in that you already have mural maintenance that can be enforced through code enforcement under the prior section 7.12.09. In other words, our code enforcement officer, if it falls into disrepair and it is not something that is any longer acceptable, then it can be subject to code enforcement. So those are the tweaks that I would make as to the current mural ordinance, and those would be my suggestions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You mentioned the part where someone put up criticism of the town council, and the town council did not like it, and they wanted it taken down. According to what I remember reading in our mural ordinance, we can't have writing that's what, I don't remember now what the requirements are, but you can't have writing so that it's distracting or large, is that correct?
Yes, the writings are supposed to be 10% of the mural itself.
Right.
So you can have
I don't
that.
know that that would be an issue, first of all. Second of all, anybody who is that thin-skinned probably doesn't need to be on the town council. I'm confused. I made my comments on what Ashley sent us that Molly McGowan sent to her on the 9th. Then I get here and we've got 2 other copies, so I'm not sure which one you're referencing.
The one I'm referencing is the most recent draft that I sent to the city. I can find the date that it was sent to the city, but that's the one that is, I believe, on your dais this evening. I think the other
I've got 3.
ordinance has language, and I think it came from Commissioner White's, I believe.
I think the one to look at is the one that says 2022-13 with the number on the top.
Well,
So we got,
I've got 2 of those.
we have 2 of those.
I'm using the one, Ashley, that you sent in the package, number 1, that, not, you didn't send it in the package, you sent it on the 9th. That's when you received it from Molly.
Right,
So that's the one I've been using.
yeah,
And then-
that's the correct one, I think. Was there another one after the one sent on the 9th?
Well, I've got 2 here up on the dais. That were. Okay. That's one, and then the other one was the one that. Okay.
So that's the one with the X's?
So now, I need to go back and look at the one that Catherine submitted, but these 2 are the same, so I don't have to worry about that. So, the only couple of questions I have is, on page 4 of 8, it says completeness. The 60-day review process shall not commence until a complete mural application has been submitted. And up above, it says the planning department review shall be completed within 20 days and the 30 days for the city commission. So is there a discrepancy there, or is it just different?
I think the intent is that the ordinance or the application review be complete in 60 days, but that it go to P&Z in 20 days and City Commission in 30 days.
Okay. Also, under the same page, G, mural size, it says, second line, 50% of a blank wall can be painted if the mural is up to 30 feet high or less. The maximum height, well, no, the 50% of a blank wall can be painted if the mural is up to 30 feet high or less. That means half of the 30 feet, right?
Yes, correct, Commissioner Jones.
The maximum height for any mural shall be limited to 30 feet from ground level. So does that mean the height of the building or the
Yes,
mural?
Yes, so you could have a mural that is 30 feet high, no higher than 30 feet, but it would only be 50% of that wall could be, so 15 feet, it's the same 15 feet. But you could move it up higher, or you could put it on the lower part of the wall if you so chose. You could put it on the higher part of the wall, you
Okay.
could put it on the lower part of the wall.
Very
But you
good.
can't do the whole wall, that's
Okay,
basically it.
that answered that question. I also am very much interested in the historic board being able to approve these. We have some buildings in that, so I do understand the content neutral. You probably didn't watch the many meetings we had regarding, and Andrea we heard content neutral. I don't know that, you went into great detail about that, and I don't know that anybody has had an issue with that. I don't know if somebody has come to you, or I was just surprised that you went into such detail about it. We do have heard it several times that we have to be content neutral. So has somebody complained to you already?
No, forgive me if I went into greater detail than you needed for that, but I wanted to give you the basis for why an ordinance can pass constitutional muster or not pass constitutional muster. And the other second piece of that discussion is it can be drafted in such a way that gives the government unbridled discretion to put the permit approval process into such a manner that the permit basically gets under advisement for too long a period of time. And that also can be a major problem with respect to the passage of the ordinance. So that's why I was giving you the building permit example.
Thank you.
Sure.
So you're saying that in Gator Country, we'd still have to be okay with a Seminole, and I can do that.
It would be hard on me as well.
I can do that. I can.
It would be hard on me.
So the red line copy here that everybody had, I asked everybody have this just so they could see it. This is what I sent to you on June 27th. The draft ordinance I saw for the first time this past Tuesday. So this is kind of new for me, and I just realized on Tuesday that the draft, that some of that language I had requested was not put in. And I asked you a few questions yesterday, Mr. Walker, that I still have not gotten answered, and I'd like to ask them if I could. The one part in here that, let's go to the residential, facing a residential structure. I had put in there that it shouldn't face a residential structure, only insofar as, if a person bought a house and it wasn't looking at a mural then, they might not want to. I would be completely amenable to there being some language added in there that if there was agreement with the residential structure that was facing it, if the current homeowner is okay with it, I'd be fine with that. And if somebody new was coming in to buy that residence and it was facing a mural, they knew it going into it. So if the residences that faced it were okay with it, I got no problem with that. So I don't know if that would make the minimum setback or the distance easier language or not.
I would be reticent to have an ordinance that would give the discretion of this board over to a residence. In other words, you have your legislative discretion.
That
to
makes
approve or
sense. I just
deny.
didn't want to be too hard-nosed about that because it's not my house, Nobody could, so that's fine. But the one part that I was pretty sincere about wanting, and it sounds to me like from all of the explanation you gave us that you're saying it provides an unconstitutional prior restraint, is processing a single mural permit application at a time. I understand that definitely is restrictive, but I'm also hearing from people in town that they really want to slow roll this. So from my perspective, I'm working for these people. I'm working for the folks that live here. So that's why I thought that verbiage might be appropriate. And if it worked out that that was not really appropriate or that folks in town didn't like that, would there not be a mechanism by which we could amend the ordinance if it was originally put out there? Is there a way legally whereby that we could do that?
You can always amend the ordinance by
Okay.
bringing another ordinance back to amend it. So the answer to that is yes. That is a way of amending an ordinance if it's not working, whatever that ordinance may be.
So
But-
that particular issue is not illegal. That's not breaking the law.
I think it would be very problematic, actually, in the application.
Is it illegal to do that?
I think
mean,
it could be ruled unconstitutional. And
Okay.
here's why. What is the legitimate public interest?
Well-
And what could you articulate in a court proceeding that says we will only have one permit in play on a 6-month basis, or whatever the time
the timing
frame
could
is?
be, I don't have a problem with tightening up the timing. I don't think it needs to be, I just threw out numbers for myself. If it needed to be tighter, I had no problem with that.
But if you take that argument to its extent and you say, okay, is that same, using the building permit analogy, and you say, do we only have one building permit that comes before the building permit official, has to be ruled on in 20 days, but you can't provide another building permit to our building official until he rules upon that one building permit, as complex as that whole situation is. And I would submit to you that an argument certainly could be made that the legislative intent in the state of Florida is that, no, our building permit official must rule on every single building permit application that is made within a 20-day time frame. Otherwise, is deemed permitted. So using that same analogy in court and defending a rule that is so highly restrictive in that manner, I think would fail constitutional muster. That is my opinion, yes, it would.
I apply for permits pretty regularly in my day job, and if we don't complete the permit application, it's not just automatically issued in 20 days, though.
If there is a ruling of completeness by the building official, you're right. I mean, if the building official says this permit isn't complete, plumbing is not satisfactory, and therefore you have to go back. Same here, if the permit application is not complete. In other words, if all the criteria that is listed in the ordinance are not provided for, then the permit is not complete. And that doesn't start your 60-day clock ticking. But if the permit is ruled complete, so our planning department should say, this mural permit is deemed complete and now it's being processed. So that's when the clock starts ticking. But to say only one permit at a time can be managed by the city, when over here, our building permit department handles numerous building permits, or our planning department handles, you can't have that same restriction in planning with respect to development approval either. I just think it would be very hard to defend.
I understand that, and I guess I put things in a want and a need category. You know, the building department, making sure you're keeping building moving forward, electrical permits moving forward, plumbing, that's a need. That's what we need to do that for our residents. This is a want. And
according to the law, art is not just a want. It's not, that is, I think that would be another argument that would not fly and would not pass constitutional muster. There are plenty of people that would come before you and say, no, art is part of my life. I'm an artist, and this is not a want for me, this is a need. And so I think that argument would fail as well, Commissioner Whites.
I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure that translates to how it impacts the exterior of the city. I appreciate art, and I am not artistic. I wish I were, but I'm not. I'm simply trying to represent what people are asking me to do here. And, you know, if it's not the will of the commission, it's not the will of the commission. That's, you know, I have no problem with that. But, you know, I put it out there because it was important, and
So again, your opinion about this ordinance, I would defend till the cows come home. You say it's a bad provision, you say it's a want, it's a need. I would defend your ability to say that and say, look, I think this provision is wrong for these reasons. And I think you have the absolute ability and the right, if not the responsibility, to say, I've talked to 100 people in this town, Scott, and not one of them likes what's going on. And they are asking me to represent that conversation I've had at a city commission meeting. And I defend your right to do that under the Constitution of the United States with everything that I have been taught from the University of Florida Law School. But what my job is a little different than that. My job is to not take a personality or a popular vote as to what should be or should not be. My job is to say this is within the bounds of law, this is not within the bounds of law. And I agree with you, we tend to decide what we do based upon a majority, and that's the nature of a democracy. But even if the majority said, do it this way, and I believed it was unconstitutional, then I have a duty to say, you should not do this, and stand up and say, just because 3 of you voted to do it this way, that is not my job. My job is to do something different than that. For example, when I first became your city attorney, there was an ordinance that was passed which put a matter on the ballot, and there was a change between first reading and second reading such that the ordinance was no longer the same ordinance that was originally passed on first reading. It was substantively different. They went to the vote, the voters enacted that charter revision, but it was invalid procedurally from the very beginning of the process. Now, how that happened and where it happened before my time here. But my job was to say the city's in a bad position legally, and we need to get out of that procedure as quickly as we possibly can. That's my job, is to defend the overall concept of the city. Really, my job is not this commission. It's the umbrella of the city. That's who my client is.
Well, I mean, in a constitutional republic, as we have here, my job is to represent everybody here. So I'm going to do that to the best of my ability, and I would still request that verbiage be included, and let it go there.
Commissioner Whites, I defend your right to do that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'll let you go in a second. I have one. So you're telling, is there any limit that we can place on it? In other words, we can't just have one come through, in your opinion. We could have 5 or 10 come through at the same time.
I think in order to do that, you should have a legitimate public interest that you can articulate in order to manage that. In other words, if you have the analogy in your planning department to only manage 5 permits at a time for some reason, then I think you may be able to state a legitimate public interest. But I don't think there is such a rule in your planning department, and there certainly is not such a rule in your building department. So how can you defend that in court? That's what I'm saying. You can pass a law. You're able to pass the law. Now, can you defend that law against a unconstitutional prior restraint? And that's where the problem or the rub comes in. In Reed, I mean, that's a good example. Reed versus the town of Gilbert. It seemed like a very innocuous law that the town passed. Put the signs up at not earlier than 9 o'clock in the morning, and they must come down by 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Seems pretty innocuous. Clarence Thomas, in writing for the United States Supreme Court, said, no, that's an unfair restraint on a directional sign to go to the Presbyterian church. And that's just, there's no rational basis for that law. As innocuous as that law seems on its face, it's inappropriate and unconstitutional. That's what Reed told us.
What gives someone the right to bring in any number of permits or permits for murals to come in that trumps our decision that that's too many?
I don't think numerically you can put that limit on there. But if you get 100 permit applications, you got to go through those for completeness. And as Commissioner White says, once it's deemed complete, then the clock starts ticking. But once you get that process underway, then that's the process you have to go through. And I don't think you can set it at 50. You can't set it at 25. You can't set it at 100. I don't know the rational basis that you can articulate to do that. That's where the problem is, in my view.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I ask a question, just kind of to help things maybe a little? As long as we meet the 60 days, if we had to schedule extra meetings within those days so they can be reviewed within the time frame, but maybe not all in the same meeting or something, would that be a compromise and something that possibly?
Kind of give it to me a little.
Like, for instance, sometimes in planning, we schedule special meetings when we're getting too many cases.
Right.
So could we schedule special meetings so then it would
Sure.
allow some
Sure,
more
sure,
time
sure.
as long as we meet the 60-day time
Correct.
frame?
Correct.
I appreciate you looking to put together an ordinance that's sound, in this, and also, I think one of the things too is it respects staff time. There's a lot of work that goes into any kind of application that comes in a process, so, having it match the timeframes of other processes we do, whether it's through planning and zoning and, whatever else, I think is a good idea. I appreciate you putting together something that you feel will pass muster and would be ready to move forward with a final draft. I guess it goes to what, planning and zoning next?
It's part of the LDC, so since it's part of the LDC, it has to be heard by plan board and then come back out into commission.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's.
It's still in draft form at that point.
Yes, when it goes to LDC, they're just an advisory board, so you just
Okay.
make a recommendation.
You will have 2 more bites at this apple. So it will go to P and Z, and then it'll come, once it comes out of P and Z, and planning and zoning may have their own set of criteria that they want to change in the ordinance. I don't know, but once we're in planning and zoning board, we'll have, I'm sure, a very thorough discussion of this ordinance. Once that is complete and they recommend it for approval, it'll come to the city commission on 2 occasions for your vote.
I just find it strange that no matter what majority of a town feels, a few people can come in and do what they want to do. That was my whole premise from the beginning of this. We had no control, and at the rate we're going, we're still not going to have any control. And that's what you're saying. We shouldn't have the control.
I think, Commissioner Jones, you're pretty well spot on with your comment. At this stage, we don't have any procedure whatsoever. So this gives you some procedure. But the other piece of it is that when government enters into a permitting process with speech, artwork, sculptures, things of that nature, you have to tread very, very lightly because the United States Constitution and the state of Florida Constitution both say you cannot control what is said or what is communicated as art, even though you may not like it, i.e. the Nazis walking through and marching in Skokie, Illinois. That's a form of free speech. And the whole town of Skokie, Illinois said, no, we don't want that, and we will refuse to permit that to happen.
I'm not talking about content. I'm talking about number, is what I'm talking about. Why the city of High Springs does not have the ability to limit the number of murals that are put in this town. That's my issue. Content, I'm not talking about at all.
Okay.
We figured that out a long time ago. But it's the number. I don't think, well, you know what we went through. Thank you.
May I clarify one thing since I have to administer this? So if it goes to the historical board and then they turn it down, does it still come to commission or does it stop there?
It stops there.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify that would be the case.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments? So what's the commission's pleasure for us to speak here?
I don't think we have anything to vote on, do we?
Staff needs direction to know if this is if y'all are ready for us to take this to the plan board.
Okay.
I'm not.
Well, let me say this. We take an oath of office to defend the Constitution of the United States. We take that. Am I correct, Jenny? So we have to govern ourselves according to the Constitution of the United States of America and to the state of Florida. Am I correct, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, sir.
So, yes, I understand how people feel, but we have taken an oath, say that we will uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. And I refuse to sit here and do anything illegal. It's just, I can't do it. That's the way it
I
is.
look at it, in a sense, myself, is we all have our want in what we want in whatever it is that we are doing, but we are also paying a law firm to keep us on the straight and narrow, to sort of lead us and tell us what we should and we should not be doing to keep ourselves out of trouble. If we're going to do that and then not pay attention to it, I sort of think we asking for trouble. If that's going to be the way we do it, then what's the point? I don't understand what am I missing here? We asked for guidance. We got it, but we don't want to deal with it. So I don't get it.
Mr. Mayor, the motion would be to send the draft to Planning and Zoning Board with the 3 amendments that I spoke of earlier. The 3 amendments would be, as to the minimum setback requirement, the murals in the historic district, that it goes to Historic Preservation Board and then on to the commission. And then the unnecessary provision for a deed restriction that we talked about in the latter part of the ordinance. That would be the appropriate motion if you so choose.
Yes, sir. So I got one more question. So if we don't come up with an ordinance, if somebody want to put a mirror up, they can put it up.
I'm not the legal person, but I would think yes, except in the historic district, they still have to go to through the certificate of appropriateness.
Sign ordinances do not protect the city, because a mural is different than a sign. It's artwork. So they're excluded from a sign ordinance. So you really have very little ability to regulate in any manner whatsoever if you don't have any regulation at all. If you're going to implement that regulation, you have to be very careful the way that you draft it and very careful in the way that you apply it.
So in other words, if somebody, I love dogs, if somebody paint a mirror with a dog and I don't like it, I don't have the right to tell a person they can't put their walk in. Now, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me now. Okay, this is not about you, Linda. This is me speaking, okay? This is not about you. So I don't have a right to tell that person, you can't paint that mirror on the wall.
Especially if it's a Georgia dog.
I'm not gonna mess with that one.
No, we're drawing the line at Georgia. Florida State, I can swallow, I don't think I can take Georgia.
Well, I spent a little time in Georgia. Okay. So do we have a motion to? Okay, give me a time. I'm coming to you, baby. Just hold on. Hold you. So, are there a motion?
If we gotta have a motion, I will make a motion that we make the necessary changes that's required and then let it go from there
Send it to the plan board.
to the planning board.
Okay, is there a second?
It's not.
There's no second.
That takes care of that.
Okay, so So
So-
that it just dies and we just, do we bring it back at another agenda? What do we do?
If the commission so chooses.
Okay, I'll
Bring
just,
it back up. There's no vote.
okay, all right.
Okay.
Why bring it back unless something's gonna change?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Let's finish that discussion first, okay? So now, since now we not voted on it, so in other words, we're not going to pass an ordinance regulating mirrors.
It does not go, my understanding of the collective wisdom of the commission is that it does not go to planning and zoning at this stage.
Okay, so it's a dead issue now. Okay, all right, ma'am.
Janet Evans, and the people that I'm listening to want an ordinance done on this. I've listened now for 61 minutes about the Constitution, and I'm a big constitutional person myself, but we have had for many, many years rules about what is allowed and is not allowed in our historic district, our city here of High Springs. Just like any housing development, there are certain rules. You can't park your boat in the driveway, those kinds of things. Those things happen all the time, and we don't have to hear a big thing about the Constitution for 61 minutes. There's nothing wrong with saying you can't paint your house to look like a zebra. Somebody might say, well, that's art. Well, you have rules that you can't do that, or you have to have colors that are in line with the historic city rules. And rules like that are fine. If you want to go and get an exception to the rule, then you do it. But the rules, the ordinances that are being discussed here are to protect the community, not to have a debate whether we can restrict free speech. Like I say, somebody could want to paint their house like a zebra. Who the heck wants to look at that? Even if they don't live there in the neighborhood, they're still going to be driving by and looking at that. For goodness sakes, let's put some stricter rules and procedures in place for our city so that any Tom, Dick, or Harry can't come in and do what they want.
Mr. Chair, Alan Alley, good building official. I haven't seen the ordinance, but as far as our department are concerned, is there anything in there or a frame not?
There is a provision in the historic district that if it, I'll pull it up. The provision in that area is that the placement of the mural shall be reviewed to ensure that it doesn't compromise or damage the historic fabric of the building. Murals shall not be painted on historically original or unpainted brick, stone, and stone surfaces in order to preserve the historic fabric of that brick and or the stone represents. Installation may not permanently damage the building and may need to be reversible in order to protect a historic resource. Can't distract from the overall character and distinctive architectural features of the historic structure. Those are primarily the provisions in the historic district part of the ordinance.
It sounds like it's dead, but if they're going to mount something to the building, we do need it on just the surface of the building, that's fine, but if they're going to be mounted plywood or a frame or anything like that, I would ask that we address that in the ordinance.
It would seem that that would be the requirement. if there's a frame part of the building, then
Like an awning,
perhaps.
no different than putting an awning on a building or anything like that. Thank you.
And just to echo what the city manager said earlier, she wasn't in the room, is in the historic district, you would still have to get a certificate of
Yes.
appropriateness. So it would still have to go through that process for anything. So you couldn't paint your house as a zebra if you're within the historical district, because it still has to get the COA and paint has to be approved and things along those lines. So just for clarification.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Commission, my name's Wallace Simmons, and in the conversation, I just had a question. Is it my understanding that more than one permit can be submitted at a time in the current ordinance language, but that the commission or the planning board doesn't have to approve more than one permit or multiple permits at a time? Was that in
No,
that, did I understand that?
No, it is that however many permits are before the Planning and Zoning Board, or however many permits are in front of the City Commission, there are time restrictions per the ordinance that have to be met. So that's it doesn't matter if there's 10, it doesn't matter if
Okay.
there's 5 or 20.
Okay, and then
Still
the
have to
other.
rule on all of those
Okay,
permits.
the other question that I had is, what happens with murals that have been installed that currently, I guess, or existing, that didn't get a certificate of appropriateness or approval, that don't have a permit, that just went up on private property, without coming through the city? Do those have to be painted over or taken down currently, or how does that process go if they're?
Just to give you clarification, there is a mural that went up this week in the historic district that staff told they need to bring back to the historic preservation board for a COA that we are scheduling for the next meeting. So I guess the question, if it's turned down, then do we tell them, okay, you have to paint over it, or
I'm not
what?
going to comment on it. It's something that's in process right now. We're not going to go into
Okay.
that.
All
That
right.
needs to be ruled
wondered.
upon when it goes before the board.
Okay.
Christy Swilly. That was one of my questions, but I don't know that we got a full answer on that. What about the ones that are already existing that are not before a board currently, that have been in place for multiple years? What will happen to those murals? Would that be something that would be grandfathered in if an ordinance was brought back?
Yes,
Okay.
they'd be grandfathered in. That's correct.
And then, to play devil's advocate, there are rumblings, of course, whatever you want to call it, as far as potential ideas for murals, if you will, that would incorporate people. What rights do those family members have if that person is no longer alive and the family does not want a mural of that family member placed on someone's building? What rights do those family members have if a private party wants to put a mural of their family member up on their building?
I think there would be very little that could be done in that instance.
So nothing to prevent the likeliness of of their family member.
I think it would be very difficult to regulate that content. I think that would be a very difficult thing to do, whether we have a permitting regime or no permitting regime.
Interesting. So all the rights go to the person who's painting it or the business owner, not to the content. That would not be deemed
Well,
offensive content
I
by
think-
the family.
I think I've been criticized for giving content-based discussion so much this evening, and I'm a little hesitant to go back into that at this, and as she says, thank you.
Just very interesting fact for family members, for the people who don't want that content up of their family. Clarification on that, thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So if there's no ordinance in place, just so that I'm clear in terms of how things go forward from here, If it's within the historic district, the COA would be submitted, and then the process would move forward by that mechanism. If there's no ordinance in place in any regard that's addressing the installation of murals, then the city has no say. We have to recognize that if we don't pass a mural ordinance, we have no say on what anybody wants to do. And I think my sense is that the reason why we didn't get a second and get a vote is because perhaps there are things that maybe the commission wants to see changed in here that may or may not pass muster, but might be able to move the process forward, that could at least get it to the plan board, get it to the historic board, and get it to a vote. I mean, we've spent thousands of dollars with your firm drafting this ordinance. I don't want to waste thousands of dollars. So in terms of getting something moving forward, for me, one of the things that I obviously wanted in there was, regulation on how quickly we needed to move forward. That may be stricken down. That's fine. Another thing that I had changed was the size. I felt like the sizes in there were a little bit too big in terms of just their appearance. I think one was 30 feet. I put it down to 20. Could we put this mural ordinance to a vote, and then through the process of voting, tweak it in that regard? I mean, is that kind of where we are? Because if we don't put something in place, we got nothing to say. Right?
I would agree with you.
Okay.
There's not a regulation in place at this stage.
Okay. Well, in that regard, then, I could offer a second to Vice Mayor James's vote to move it forward with the understanding that we could modify verbiage along the way.
Her motion was specific, and so you're moving it forward to P and Z. You still retain the right to make comments all along the way at P and Z, of the right to make comments at the first reading and the second reading. So you certainly have that right.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's important that we move something forward so we can at least try to have some kind of process in place, because they're coming. They're going to come regardless. It's you see them in Gainesville, they're all over the place, and Gainesville has no regulations whatsoever. So I'm not sure I want to look like Gainesville.
Yes.
That motion failed and is no longer valid.
Yes.
A new motion would have to be made.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am.
I'll make a motion then.
I'll second it.
Thank you. To move ordinance 2022-13 forward for consideration by the Historic and Plan Board.
As originally made.
I would still like to request that my size restrictions be maintained in there, and processing one permit application at a time was also included for discussion.
Your motion is as to size, did you say? And
Yes.
then what was the second one?
To process one permit application at a time. I maintain that doesn't break the law. It doesn't have any impact on being content neutral. So I would still like for that to be included.
Mr. Mayor, I will vote for it so that we have something in place. Just so that those of you who have fought so hard for this know that it really doesn't matter either way. Those who wanted to do the murals, whether we have a permit in place or not, they still do have the ability to be able to do that. Thank you.
Commissioner Whites, did you also include in your motion the changes the attorney recommended, like
I'm
removing
sorry,
a couple of those?
yes, I understand those as well, yes, as well as the few edits that you had, yes.
So if I understand your motion correctly,
Yes,
it
sir.
is to the amendments that I recommended to the.
Yes, sir.
And in the draft that goes to the Planning and Zoning Board, it would have the size restriction, which I think you said is 20 feet can't be any higher than 20 feet high.
Right,
correct?
instead of 30.
20-foot high, and then one permit at a time will be in the draft that goes to P and Z, and then they can decide
Yes,
how
sir.
the suggestions as I have has no numeric restriction. Yours will be in it that will say one permit at a time.
Yes, sir.
That's the
Yes,
draft.
please.
Okay.
Now, I said I would second it, but when I said that, I was sort of on the, how do I say this? I didn't know you wanted to include the one permit again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then
I'll second it.
Okay.
With the understanding that throughout the process, that language could be stricken. That's my understanding. Is that correct, Mr. Walker?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, sir.
But you did it already, okay.
Questions, any comments? Anyone from the audience on this ordinance that's been on there? Up for vote now. Any questions from the audience? Okay, Jenny? The person, okay. All in favor, that, yes, you got a question? All in favor, that be known by saying aye?
Aye.
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 Okay, so the process go forward and it's not in some, gotcha.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I will send it to Planning and Zoning Board and incorporate Commissioner White's comments as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, moving on to citizen requests and comments for issues not on the agenda. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 5 minutes, please.
My name is Andrew Miller. Good evening, Commission Board. I am a board member of the High Springs Chamber of Commerce. My job is social media marketing and event entertainment booking. I'm here to address some of the concerns that were brought out at the last commission meeting. Commissioner Ross hasn't been an active member of the Chamber of Commerce since 2020, so he may be unaware of the changes that have been made. First and foremost, within the last 2 years, the Chamber has helped over 3,000 people. 2 back-to-school giveaways, a home essential giveaway, and act of kindness to the local homeless. Commissioner Ross also stated that our membership has gone up, and that is correct. But all of our board members are volunteer and do not receive salaries like other chambers in the surrounding areas. All of our funds are used to help with grand opening ceremonies, our annual tree lighting event, the Christmas parade, and the necessary requirements to host Pioneer Day, which doesn't just help us, but all the local businesses in town, because there is an added 10,000 in foot traffic that weekend. Also, Commissioner Ross stated that only chamber members we have are the stores downtown. That was a false statement. Some of our most active members are outside of the downtown district, including but not limited to Poetic Cuts, the Grady House, Jim Douglas, and Cricket Wireless, just to name a few. In closing, I would like to say the Chamber strives to work with every organization in town. We have partnered with the Kiwanis Club, the Children's Trust, the High Spring Historic Society, the Women's Club, Parks and Recs, and the list goes on. And Commissioner Ross, the Girl Scouts that you mentioned last week having a problem with Pioneer Day, they just worked with us Sunday at our back to school giveaway. They had a sign-up table, and they mentioned that they signed up more girls than they had in quite some time, and they are looking forward to working with us next year. Thank you all for your time.
Anyone else for anything not on the agenda? All right, seeing no one rising. Sure.
The only thing I'm going to address there is, it stated I wasn't a member since 2020. You might want to check the records. My business, the only year they haven't renewed was 2022.
Commissioner comments doesn't relate to what was spoken to. Kevin, could we have an explanation as to who was up on the screen up there?
Those are representatives for the last item on your agenda. They requested to be a part of the meeting via Zoom, and it's a private-only link.
Do we allow Zoom? I mean, I thought we had determined.
Decided not to have open Zoom meetings where, with response and everything, but we have actually allowed people to attend by Zoom, such as the city attorney at the last meeting. On
City
occasion.
staff, yes.
Yeah, the, one of them is the plat for Fairfield Oaks. Was that person was Zooming in, because I don't know why they couldn't be here, so we were allowing them to talk on the Fairfield Oaks plat, the representative for the plat.
I would like to request that in the future that at least we be notified as to who's up on the board when we're here.
Okay.
We don't have any idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to new business. Discuss and consider the act of final fire assessment, Resolution 2022-K.
Mr. Mayor, this is a Resolution 2022K, a resolution of the City of High Springs, Florida, relating to the provision of fire services, facilities, and programs. The City of High Springs, Florida, establishing the rate of assessment, imposing fire services assessments against the assessed property located within the City of High Springs for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2022, approving the assessment roll, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass Resolution 2022-K as read by title only.
This is the same resolution that y'all passed on the July 28th meeting. This is just a second reading. It does not change the established fire assessment. The same numbers as we did, or we're currently in this year. It'll be the same numbers next year. And we just need approval on this to continue to move forward.
I make a motion that we approve Resolution 2022-K as read.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone from the audience? See, no one rising? Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Ambrose?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Item number 2, discuss and consider the act of primary plat for Fairfield Oaks.
Okay, so this is the plat for Fairfield Oaks, and it is 32.5 plus or minus acres. It's located north of US 441 and south of Pine Hills Cemetery. It's 117 lots. 33% of the lots are 5,750 square feet. 66% of the lots are 6,900 square feet. The minimum home size will be 1,500 square feet. There is 8.73 acres of open space, which is quite significant for a 32.5 acre development, and a 2 acre park that will be activated. The right-of-way is 50 feet. The pavement width will be 22 feet. And there will be Miami curb, which is more like the sloping curb. 5-foot sidewalks on both sides. There's a 10-foot buffer all along the subdivision, a 50-foot buffer along 441. And there will also be significant landscaping, including 36-inch berms at a 1-to-4 slope. It meets all city regulations and is in line with the planned development. And it's just the preliminary plat. There will be a final plat coming before you as well.
Commissioners? Questions?
Yes, sir. So you're saying, Ashley, if I got your numbers correctly, got 10.73 acres of open space?
8.73.
8.73 acres plus a 2-acre park.
No, the 2-acre park is incorporated. in
Is
the eight-
incorporated.
Yes, ma'am.
So we've got 8.73 acres of green space
But
out of 32.5 acres.
Yes, and some of that green space is used for detention, so that's not all, that all can't be usable green space.
I maintain, sorry, my original perspective is that we can leave the natural green space. We don't have to build parks if we just have bigger lots. And there are no subdivisions close to this that are anywhere near this dense. Edgemore across the street, I think it's Kensington Place. It's north or south of here. You know, and we're talking 60-foot wide lots. A quarter of an acre is 100 feet. Quarter of an acre, and that's tiny for High Springs.
I think since their plan development was already approved, if they meet the regulations for plating, then, correct me if I'm wrong, but then I don't want to say you have to approve it, you don't, you can vote on anything you want, but typically if it meets the regulations of plating, we can't go back and change the zoning.
Mayor, I would agree with that statement.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Anyone else? Now, just for clarification now, this is the lot, these lots are right there next to the cemetery. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. They're
Off 441. So it's
South-
not down there past First United Methodist Church. It's on this side of First United Methodist Church. Okay, just for clarity. For clarity, there are homes in that area with these type of lot sizes. Yes. That would be off of 222. Off of 222. I forgot the name of the subdivision back up in there. Anybody know? That's it. Canola Gardens. That's the nearest subdivision next to this. Just for clarity, for records.
And Ashley, this is plating at this point, so they still have to go through their engineering design.
And
You
what-
know, there were some questions about roads that need to be addressed still. There are a lot of questions that they need to answer before they invest in the final engineering and go through those hurdles and come back to us for those approvals. They need to know that this is okay.
Right, they have to still do final construction plans, and they have to do a traffic impact analysis to ensure that what's off-site has enough capacity for to handle the traffic of the homes in the subdivision.
All right. Is there a vote? Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I move we approve the preliminary plat for Fairfield Oaks as presented.
A second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Anyone from the audience? Questions or comments? All right. Anyone on, you said somebody was on Zoom wanted to speak on this?
Does anyone else want to speak that's called in? Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
Okay, motion carries 4-1. Okay, item number 3. Discuss and consider act a site plan for the Church of God by Faith.
Okay, Mayor and Commission, this is being brought before you today. As you know, we changed the site plan approval process, so all commercial site plans come up to the commission. So although this is an existing site, if they want to put something like a fence, a storage building, if a commercial site wants to put up a structure, then they will be brought to you through the site plan approval process, even for minor modifications. So this is considered a minor site plan. It is, this is a Church of God by Faith. It's located on US Highway 27. It's the white church on the left as you head out to the Springs. They would like to put a 12-foot by 24-foot shed. The building would be metal with wood siding. They are planning to locate it, if approved, behind the church. There's 30 feet from the side of the neighbor's property, 20 foot between the building and the shed, and 20 foot from the back property line. There is a tree line in the back, so you can't really see it from the neighboring property. Staff is recommending approval. The shed would be for First Harvest Food Pantry, so it'd be to store the food for the food pantry in it, and it's unable to be seen from the road.
Okay, just one point of clarification. It's the brick church on the left-hand side, after the
sorry.
white church. On the left-hand side. Any more discussion?
I mean, this is one where, I mean, the property that's behind it is zoned industrial because of how it's split up against Railroad Avenue. And I think that what they're asking for is an appropriate use for their property and reasonable given the zoning and neighbors.
Okay.
And we also had the Public Works Director go out there and check the lay of the land to ensure that once they put it down, the drainage will still be okay.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I move we approve the request as presented for the site plan.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Anyone from the audience, questions or comments? All right, hearing none, all in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, item number 4, discussion rental and fees for city-owned buildings.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Miss Vice Mayor, City Commission. Last meeting, Commission requested staff to provide an updated rental policy that would be more detailed for the practices of the city of High Springs. And we provided a PowerPoint. I will go through the first several slides, and Ms. Dados will go through the others. We asked that, let us go through the PowerPoint, we'll have discussion afterwards. Also, for the rentals, we looked into, I think, 3 or 4 different cities locally, roughly. I think it was Alachua, Newberry. I think we even looked in the Orlando area as well. So just to kind of piece it all together, and hopefully you guys would like this. Just hit right here, Kevin. And these are the 3 rooms that we were going about. Let me see. We'll just go. It's the Civic Center, the Post Breeze room at the old school, and the Santa Fe room. These are the process. This is the process. Requests for meeting rooms are made through the Parks and Recreation Department. The Parks and Recreation Department confirms the availability. Payment is made through the Utility Billing Department. Meeting rooms are reserved after payment is made and a written confirmation is received from the city. As of right now, it seems to be working. We've been doing this process, I believe now for about 3 years roughly right now. Yeah. Here are just the current room rates that we have. I believe we haven't made any changes over the past several years as far as payments. The proposed rates keep the same rate structure and deposit amount per room. Staffing after normal business hours subject to pass-through fees. Pass-through fees are permitted to 1.5 times employee pay. Fees will be discussed prior to facility room rental. Typically, that's not that big of an issue. However, during the weekends, it can be an issue sometimes if we have a rental for a Saturday night or a Saturday and then falling into a Sunday. But for the most part, seems to work out pretty well that way. And here are the rules of use. City programs and sponsored events have priority in the use of the meeting rooms. The city reserves the right to reschedule confirmation meeting room reservations to accommodate city-sponsored events and programs for any reason. The city reserves the right to deny any group to revoke meeting room privileges at any time. Also, commercial use for meeting rooms is not permitted. No group may solicit or collect any admission charge, voluntary offering of any compensation, nor may it present the item for sale. However, sale of service, products, merchandise, material, or other items, or soliciting for donations that are authorized, the city-sponsored programs or events that are permitted. In these instances, the city may charge a percentage of gross revenues and rent as deemed appropriate by the city commission. Reservations for the meeting rooms for special events or recurring meetings may be made up to a year in advance. Reservations for all the other rooms may be made up to 6 months in advance. Individuals must be 18 years of age to reserve a room. And I believe, Mr. Thados, you want to go ahead and do the... Okay.
I'll take it from here. And just to clarify, this is for discussion purposes to give us direction so we can go back and, put something in a policy and bring back to y'all through resolution. So, the recurring meetings. Recurring meetings are non-city sponsored meetings that happen on a recurring basis over a period of time and or restrict the use of city facilities for an extended period of time. So, so when we say non-city sponsored, those are so parks and recreation meetings. Someone wants to use it for robotics or something like that. That's not considered recurring. It's something if it's non-city sponsored. Recurring meetings must have a meeting room reservation agreement. The city commission must approve all meeting room reservation agreements. The city commission will make their decision after recommendation from the Parks Board. So if somebody wants to use the room, say, every other Friday for 6 months, or they want to take large chunks of time that, would make it so other people can't use the room, then that would go to Parks Board for consideration. They would make a recommendation to the city commission. Criteria for decision-making is that the meetings provide a positive public service or legitimate public benefit to the community. So that a determination would need to be made prior to the Parks Board advising and the city commission deciding to grant the recurring meeting. Waiver of fees. Meeting rooms may be waived for the following organizations: city-sponsored event and activities, other governmental agencies, public or private school groups. And then a 50% discount on meeting room fees may be given to the following organizations: 501c, 528, nonprofit, not-for-profit, or tax-exempt organizations. We also added military and senior citizens located in the city. The City Commission reserves the right to waive fees for any event, activity, or program that it finds will provide a positive public service and legitimate public benefit to the community. So again, that's kind of the litmus test that we're recommending.
Can I ask you a question before you move on? When you say senior citizen, what's considered a senior citizen age-wise?
I think 55 plus.
5 and up, yeah.
So I'm almost there in a few years.
Just out of curiosity, some people see senior citizens as 60, some see it as 65, some see it as, ARP see it as
55.
55.
Yeah.
It's whatever y'all want. Y'all can make it any age.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Just curious. So 55.
Yeah. So examples of organizations that would be eligible for full waivers. We're targeting people mainly for Parks and Rec purposes, including the athletic organization, Santa Fe Babe Ruth Baseball and Softball, Alachua County Task Force on Recreation, Gainesville Sports Commission, BMX, robotics, Alachua County Elections, Alachua County Children's Trust, Alachua Conservation Trust. For instance, the Conservation Trust has, when we bought the canoe outpost, we had discussions about them doing educational programs and things like that. Again, we have the public benefit litmus test. Alachua Tourism Council, Alachua County Schools. Since we added schools, we added some of the private schools, First Christian Academy, Living Springs Academy. Again, these are examples of organizations that staff would recommend for waivers. And if you want to add any or take any off the list, let us know. Examples of organizations that are eligible to receive 50% off. And we went by kind of how we were doing it previously. And if y'all want to change that, let us know as well. The Chamber of Commerce, Heart of High Springs, Women's Club, Garden Club, Kiwanis, Lions Club, Rotary Masons, Historical Society and Douglas Historical Society, Boy Scouts, and Girl Scouts. And so those are staff's recommendations, and we just thought we'd put it out there for discussion and for y'all to give us guidance so we can get something written and back to you.
Any questions?
I have no, excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I have no questions, but we got this rather late, and it was rather lengthy. I just haven't had a time to review all the paperwork.
I understand.
So I will be glad to review it, me personally, and get back with you next meeting, but the others can do differently.
Yeah, and yes, emails or calling me, talking to me, and I can incorporate.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I? The one request I would have, just based on the cursory review I've made here, is to move the chamber over to the organization eligible for waivers instead of eligible to receive 50% off. I think it's a pretty unique organization, and, I think cities like to work with their chamber because the chamber does a lot for the city, so I think that would be something I'd be interested in continuing on, if you could consider that, please.
Mayor. The only thing, Commissioner Weiss, that I would say to that is the litmus test was public purpose. So the chamber's purpose is to benefit the business community. And so we start to create a very gray area by basically any organization that is a nonprofit status, which we've already said is eligible for a reduction, I don't know how you wouldn't then define public purpose if a group that is organized to benefit a particular segment of the community and not all, even though it benefits the community, it benefits by their growth and benefit. So I just think that gets murky, and at that point, who isn't qualified for a waiver?
Mr. Mayor, may I respond? I appreciate that perspective. I just think that in any town, the Chamber of Commerce is always where people go to find out where to do, what to do, how to spend their money in the town. So I think that, if you extrapolate out that purpose, it does benefit the entire community. And I understand it's a 501c3, just like many other nonprofits are as well.
No,
but it is. Okay, so it's a nonprofit. Correct. Okay, so it's a nonprofit, but it's a very unique nonprofit that, if I go to any town, the first thing I'm going to do is look for the chamber, and they're going to say, hey, you need to canoe this river, you need to go to this restaurant. So I do think that just functionally, that particular group is a unique standalone, and I think it stands out as serving the entire community as a whole.
I was going to say the same thing. They serve different organizations. They do a lot of things in the area. So I don't want to start opening up a can of worms saying one can do it and then not others. I just want to be fair across the board. That's my whole thing. If we got to do it for one, I think we should do it for all. I understand that Chamber of Commerce do business, help businesses, but you have other organizations doing other things in the city, not just only the chambers. I understand that they do help businesses downtown, but that's one segment of the city. The city's bigger than just downtown, so we just can't point out just one organization. I'm not in favor with that.
About doing a waiver for all up to a certain number of times a year. So if you say you write your list of nonprofits that are the ones that are located in High Springs, not outside the city, and then say they all get, 3 to 6 or however many waivers a year for free, and then after that 50% off. Or I'm just trying to throw something out there, see.
Yes.
I don't know that it's so much the Chambers pays their, quote, fair share. I just found it interesting that prior to the last year, maybe two, it was never under discussion. The Chamber was never charged for the renting of the facilities for the mixers. This is for the businesses to come together and discuss what's going on in the town. That was my main concern. Why? For their entire being, they were never charged, and all of a sudden, a year or so ago, it became an issue. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question? Does the city give the chamber any money? Do they budget any money for the chamber to function within the confines of the city?
We do not budget money for the chamber. However, they have one of our facilities, and the rent's pretty low. So there's kind of that in-kind thing going on, but we do not budget a specific amount of money. We do partner on a number of things, and they provide the city services. So, and we provide them some services with what they do as well.
I know some surrounding cities donate money, some budget for, because, what they do, especially for here, a lot of people come in for the things that the chamber does, but, would that be an appropriate course of action to take to consider, putting in the budget whatever it would cost to rent the facility as a city and a chamber partnership? I mean, because from my perspective, the city, any town or city and their chamber of commerce work together. And any other optics, I think, are not really appropriate. And I'd be concerned that we're giving the wrong message, that, we're not supporting our chamber and our chamber doesn't support the city. Would that be an appropriate thing to do? Or?
This is, so I've worked in several cities that do budget money for the chamber. This is a legal question because I don't know in Florida. I know some states you can budget money for nonprofits and other states you can't. So that would be a legal question.
The key is that any organization that is a 501c6 organization qualifies under that section, which is what a chamber does. Business-related organizations also that are not-for-profit fall within 501c6. And so if a business organization came to you, like a realtor board perhaps, or some sort of group like that, you would need to treat everyone the same. So if that happens, that's the point the mayor was making, I think, a moment ago, and I would agree with that. So it's I think because there is an overriding purpose to business organizations that have as their function to promote your High Spring businesses, I think that is a public purpose, lending yourself the ability to allow for assistance through rental reduction or even a membership or other financial benefit to such a 501c6 organization. But other organizations also qualify under that section, and those organizations would be entitled to the same relief or benefit.
Yes.
Many years ago, the city commission used to budget, I think it was $1,000 or $1,200 a year to go to the chamber. But that was many years ago.
May I ask another question, please? I'm sorry.
Didn't we also prior to, I think it was '08 is when we stopped doing that, somewhere in that time frame, '08, '09, somewhere in there, maybe a little bit before then, but didn't we also do stuff with other civic groups like Rotary and things along those lines? And we did it for all of them. It wasn't just inclusive to one. And due to
Yes.
budget constraints, I believe the city, and the mayor may remember this, we scaled back on that and started offering in-kind services as far as providing support and things like that for
Correct.
events.
And they also did a line item in the budget for, to donate money for different things.
Ashley, you mentioned that they have use of the public facility, which I understand. So do we have a contractual agreement with them every year?
Yes, ma'am.
And they provide us with a COI
A certificate.
of insurance?
Of
With the
insurance.
city being listed as a certificate holder?
I need to double check that. I mean, they're supposed to, but I just would like to double check that that's on
And
file
for any
still.
other public facility that's being used, like the museums
Yeah.
over here?
I need to double check that everyone's is on file. They're supposed
Right.
to, like Anderson's, we have theirs, you know, so.
Right.
So they are supposed to, but I need to double check.
I know we have the museums because I got it from Diane not too long ago.
So we have those in place for everybody.
Yeah.
Anybody who's using a public facility
Yes.
for an extended period of time, we have a rental agreement. They
Right.
pay whatever the nominal fee is that they
Right.
pay.
It's very nominal. I think it's $10 a year or something like this.
$10 a year, and then there's
Yeah.
a caveat on there about helping keep up with maintenance and some different things.
And they re-up the COI every year
Right.
as well. So I mean, I agree with Mayor Williams that, the museum and the chamber, all those that are using them for extended period of time, we've got to be uniform across the board. But this is somewhat unique and different because they're using a different city facility.
Right.
But I guess, again, I would maintain that the chamber is a unique partner to the city. And not saying that other charitable organizations are not. Absolutely. I was very involved with the Boy Scouts when my son was involved in that troop, so I absolutely understand that. But I just think the chamber is a unique and different, where, the city wants to work with this chamber.
I was listening to Catherine, and I can't now remember what my question was. Sorry.
Oh, remember.
Okay. The rec department, whatever they determine, whomever can occupy those rooms, does the city cover insurance for anyone who occupies those rooms for any length of time?
I'll let Damon answer that.
Like Santa Fe Babe Ruth?
No,
as
no,
a-
no. The youth summer camp,
They provide insurance.
they
That's correct.
provide
Yes, ma'am.
insurance, okay.
I mean, typically if they're like one-off, they don't use it all the time, we wouldn't ask for insurance, and like Florida League of Cities would just kind of cover that. But anyone in extended length of time or doing certain activities that are more likely to cause the need for insurance.
Are we done?
So, is the direction to put the chamber on the waiver list or not, or just keep it 501c3 and not specify specifically and just have more generic headings as staff has recommended, just because I need some direction?
I would request that the chamber be moved over to the waiver list, please.
I disagree. If we're
I
gonna do it for-
agree.
If we're going to do it for one, I think we should do it for all. I totally disagree. Yes. Sure.
Wallace Simmons again, and I'm the local 4-H leader in High Springs, and I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity now to also ask that our name be put on the waiver. I've spoken with Damon recently, and he did inform me that there were going to be some changes. We are looking to use the facilities once a month for our regular meeting. We are a 501(c)(3). We're connected with the University of Florida and the county. So again, I'll put that request in now. Thanks.
I think the way it's going to work is we have our generic kind of definitions, and then we will go ahead and do a list so for clarification. But it will be, to include, but not limited to. So if we've missed anybody, then we can just go by the other guidelines.
Yes.
I understand at the last meeting, Commissioner Jones requested a list of all of the rooms that were rented and who they were rented to and such. I myself did not get that list. I would like to see a copy of one if someone could make that available to me. Thank you. Because I think it should be fair.
Me.
Yes.
That was the part of this discussion that I was not able to get to that. It was a very lengthy document, so I haven't had a chance to review it myself, but if it can be made available to others, that would be good. Thank you.
It is online on the city website to the agenda, on the agenda packet. This is the second link. I have added it on there with the agenda items.
Any other discussion? I guess you got your marking on those?
You'll have this at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. All righty, so we're moving on to city attorney's report and update.
I think to a collective sigh of relief, I've already talked too much.
Madam City Manager?
Just a couple things coming up. On the budget workshop on the 16th. August 23rd at 6:30 at the Opera House. The CRA is doing hosting Representative Chuck Brennan, so that should be a good time. And I think there's going to be a taco bar. Staff comes up with some good ideas every now and then. So registration for fall sports is underway. Police. There's a notation on, again, look at the High Springs highlights, but be safe when you're taking and picking your kids up from school. Fire on High Springs highlights pointed out that we can text 911 if needed. It's always good to call, but texting is an option if the situation calls for it. A new employee is in building, Phyllis Breen, so if y'all are around the area, stop by and introduce yourselves. As well as, we started several of the ARPA projects, including, if y'all have seen the roofs at City Hall, the fire building and chamber. So we're moving along quite well on those.
A quick update, the main lifts we talked about at the ARPA meeting. Scope of work's been done. It's out with the company that installed it. It was the one bid we received back. We should have final numbers on Monday and be moving forward with it. So we're waiting on time frame and everything else. In clarification, the city fire station roof won't get started till the 22nd. The materials just came in. You want to touch base on the August 21st, the Employee Appreciation Day?
Oh, yeah, good one. Yeah, so at Camp Colaqua, we're going to have an Employee Appreciation Day on the 21st. It's from, is it 1 to 6 or 12 to 6? I can't remember. 12 to 6. There will be food for the employees out there. Camp Colaqua was kind enough to host us free of charge, and there will be some fun activities, including the rubber duck races. So I was actually Googling how to make my rubber duck go faster, but I can't figure it out. 1 to 6. Noon to 6, yeah.
The CRA social is the same night as we may have a budget meeting, and it's also election day. Is there any way we could move that?
That Chuck Brennan was available to do it. And it was preset. I can ask his office if it's available to be moved, but I think everything's already in work. We were too far along. I didn't set that date. David Sutton set the date prior.
Yeah, we haven't had a CRA meeting in a while, so
Yeah, we're going to have one in
know.
September. So
Okay.
we're working on a few things. There's some changes, and we'll get together.
We've also have the finding of necessity has recently been completed, so that will be on the next CRA meeting as well for the extended CRA area.
Well, I just think it may not be as well attended as it could be, because we may have a budget meeting that night if we have to, so. Yeah,
We're exploring some options. I don't know that we're going to be able to change it, though.
Okay.
We're working on it.
okay. And I just wanted to add a little letter to Kevin's acronym. It should be PISO, because Tuesday I was headed down to Newberry, and there was a branch that was on fire, and I stopped, and there was Kevin. So he's not only the PIO, he's safety. And I stopped, and I'm like, "You good?" And he goes, "Yep, I've already called it in." So I just wanted to give a shout out to Kevin and thank him for not having to call Bruce and everybody else out there, and I appreciate it.
I was going to mention too that I was looking forward to Chuck Brannon, the soiree. I was planning on being there, and I feel badly that I can't be there. I will be at Forest Grove Baptist Church in Alachua. I'm going to be a ballot distributed. So I will be there all day long and will not be able to make it. And I've already stated my other comment. Thank you.
I just want to remind you too that your next budget workshop is on the 16th, and I'm going to miss that one because I'm going to be at the polls. And as Commissioner Jones just said, also on the 23rd.
Well, feel free to make meetings with Bruce, Diane, and I.
Okay.
All right, if there's nothing else need to come before this commission, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to make.